How can an experienced productivity enthusiast make positive changes to their task management? So, this is a night we'll be talking to the productivity geeks, the nerds, the people who manage lots of tasks and who have already been through some level of development in terms of their task management. If that fits the bill for you, in fact, you may be someone who already helps other people. But what if I told you that it's inevitable that at some point you'll face some of the same challenges that beginners face? And what if I told you that it's not only inevitable, but you can't use the old approach that you've used in the past to improve your task management? My name is Francis Wade, and tonight I'll be taking you through a first of a kind discussion around assessment, its power, and how to use it to move yourself up in terms of your task management skills. But let's make sure that you can hear me and I can see you. If you could just say something in the chat, say good evening, good night, good morning, whatever time it may be for you in the world. Let me know that you're alive out there and you're hearing me, because we're going to be interacting all evening. This is just the beginning. So the purpose of our evening is to answer that question that I just asked. How do you, someone who's an experienced productivity enthusiast, continue to make positive changes? So I'm going to be speaking to give you a sense of the context of the question and how to answer it, the background. And we're going to be going into some exercises. I'll have you go back to the room that we just came from, where you'll be working at your tables on a few cases that I'll be giving you. You'll come back to this room, I'll bring you back, and you'll be answering the question that I'll be posing in the cases, and we'll do a debrief, and I'll be hopefully be able to illuminate some of the principles that you need to use if you are someone who is an experienced productivity enthusiast, someone who's managing lots of tasks. Hi, Susan. How are you? I'm seeing lots of people that I know already. So in the chat, as you can see, I'm putting in slides, and to blow up the slides, all you need to do is to double click on them. So you're someone who's already been through productivity ABC 1, 2, 3. You've been through the basics. You gained a lot from what you learned. And in fact, you enjoyed learning it, because when you learned those initial lessons, you found they made a very big difference. Probably because you were kind of a beginner. So everything you did worked. And it was kind of thrilling, right? You probably remembers what that was like to make some initial changes to your task management and feel the thrill of them actually working as you got better. But now that you're experienced managing lots of tasks, that may have been 20 years ago that you read that first book. Not so much. Now that you're managing lots of tasks, your task volume has increased, and the initial ideas that you picked up when you were a beginner or when you were just starting out don't really work as well as they used to. So something has shifted, and we're here tonight to find out exactly what that might be. Well, there's a law, and the law of diminishing returns generally says that as you become more skilled in a particular area, it's harder to make progress. And that's true for task management as well. As you add more tasks and as you perfect the very early lessons that you learned, it becomes harder to make the kind of improvements you made when you first started out. Most sports are like that, right? You invest some time in learning the fundamentals, and once you've learned them, you can't go back and, unless you're making fundamental errors, you can't go back and just learn the way you did the basics that you first learned. You can't go from college back to kindergarten, in other words, take the same lessons and hope to make progress. You need a different kind of lesson. It's true for sports. It's a reason why the problem that productivity enthusiasts who manage lots of tasks can't fix them by going to YouTube and just doing a search. And I've done these searches, by the way, just to let you know. How do I manage lots of tasks? I'm an experienced productivity enthusiast. I'm a nerd. I've read all of the basic stuff. How do I get to the next level? But there's a few complications, and I want to tell you about a few of them. The first is that in task management, when you learn those original lessons, you may have been a beginner, but you weren't a starter. And what do I mean by that? Well, the practices that you heard of for the first time when you were a beginner actually were practices that you were already using. They just didn't have a name. Like capturing, for example. Most people who are experienced in task management know that that's the first point of entry of a task into their system, right? But that's something that every human being does. They may not be able to name it, which means they can't improve it, they can't measure it, they can't move to any kind of level, but they kind of do it, mostly using their memory, and they get by using it, right? All right, that's the first complication. The second complication is that in task management, what makes it different is that it's not like a sport that you do for a few years and then you stop. Instead, it's a practice that you use as long as you're alive, as long as you haven't lost your senses. No Alzheimer's, no dementia. Right up until the day when you can't manage any task, you'll be managing tasks, which could be well into your old age. For most of us, I think, we're managing tasks right up until the point where we can't anymore and we pass away. So this is not a sport in the sense that it's something you engage in now and again. This is a lifelong pursuit. And the skills that you'll develop as you develop them in this session will actually last a lifetime and won't go away and won't stop. So the third complication is that as you get better at managing tasks, you will want to manage more tasks. So what forever means is that in the future, you'll be managing more tasks than you are now. Now, the only exception is when people retire. At that point, some make a conscious effort to not try to manage so many tasks. But some don't. And all of us, right up until the point when we retire, will be facing a upward curve in which we need to figure out ways to manage more tasks than we did before. You've probably noticed that since COVID, you're managing more tasks. Anybody notice that? Just put a note in the chat. If you notice that during COVID, you've been managing more tasks than you were before. All of a sudden, it's as if the world just multiplied itself. And in response, you had to scramble. Thanks, Rosemary. Yes, who else? How many of you have noticed that in COVID? The variety has changed, the volume has changed, and your tools have pretty much remained the same. So the fourth complication is that a task is not a physical object. A task is a psychological object. And psychological objects, because they're only created and their origin is here, means that they behave and operate very differently than physical objects and even digital objects. So each of those three kinds of objects each have their own idiosyncrasies. But tasks, psychological objects, have a tendency to slip out of mind and disappear. And when they disappear, we have a very difficult time managing them as a consequence. Okay, so with those complications, this is why you can't just go to YouTube. What most of us are hoping will happen, those of us who have studied under other schools of thought, who have studied, read books, taken courses, is that we're hoping that there'll be a guru who'll come and save us, right? Because it's happened before. Someone bright. You know, I took a course in the early 2000s called Mission Control, made by a brilliant guy, brilliant fellow. And we can hope that at some point another guru will show up with another, maybe a 3-letter solution. And maybe this time he'll have an app, because back when I was learning for the first time how to manage time and manage tasks, there were really no apps that were really powerful. And maybe the next time he, or it'll be a she, will show up and they'll have something great that we could just adopt. Is that going to happen? I'm going to argue and say that that's not going to happen. that is wishful thinking on our part. That a guru is really helpful when you're at the beginning. But as you become more sophisticated, as you manage more tasks, as you master the lessons of the guru, as you pick and choose from what he or she teaches, you need a different approach. And it won't come from guru number two. So why should you care about this? Who are the kinds of people who care about their task management and improving it over time? Well, they tend to be, the research says, slightly type A, very driven and ambitious and impatient and sometimes very competitive, but definitely proactive and very concerned about how long things take. And they often use their calendars to manage their activities because they're interested in accomplishing aspirational and sort of ambitious kinds of goals that other people will kind of say, doesn't he ever take a break? Have you ever met a CEO or a managing director who also does marathons in his or her spare time? A lot of them tend to be type A, and a lot of them push the envelope of what they can accomplish. So the kind of people who care a lot about this, and if this fits, consider and just think about it for a moment. If you have tendencies like this, that you're managing a lot of tasks now, more than perhaps the other people that you spend time with. And in the future, you're going to be managing even more. So this conversation could be a game changer for you. This whole line of thinking could be one that actually moves you into a different realm when it comes to your effectiveness and you're accomplishing your dreams, your aspirations, your goals, in any given part of your life. In respect to just having kids, you hear these awful stories of parents who spend their whole time sacrificing for their kids, but at the office. And when they get to 21, the kids get to 21, 22, they say, okay, well, I can spend some more time with you. The child says, I don't know who you are, and wants to have nothing to do with you. So some of the ambitions that we have in this enlightened age is that we want to raise our children in a way that does not happen. And we want to accomplish all kinds of big objectives in all parts of our lives. So more task volume, and this is the problem that type A's have, is that, as you can see from the diagram, you may start off at a particular level as a beginner, and then it grows the second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, is that as the task volume grows, it eventually bumps up against the limits of your capacity. It's like a balloon inside of a box. And as you blow on the balloon and put more air in, more tasks, it fills up the box. But the box is of corrugated, not iron, but it's of corrugated cardboard. It can't move anymore. And eventually something bursts. Something happens that causes a problem because there's more tasks than the capacity of the box can effectively manage or hold. And what happens when the number of tasks grows to that limit? Remember before I said, what if I told you that at some point it's inevitable that you'll experience the symptoms of a beginner? Well, there are unwanted symptoms that you'll experience when that balloon gets to be the size of the box. Hopefully it won't burst, right? Because it sounds awful. But it'll feel the pressure. And those unwanted symptoms in task management it's a kind of like a pressure that comes from managing lots of tasks. And here are some of the unwanted symptoms and we're going to talk about some of these in the cases that we work on tonight. Overwhelm. You can just read through that list. These are the symptoms that they get beginners to start learning about task management. So it gets them to pick up their first book. But they're the very same symptoms that someone who is experienced feels when that balloon gets to be the size of the box. Or in other words, when they have so many tasks that it reaches the limits and the edges of their capacity. Now they've got to work on their capacity, on growing the box to escape these symptoms. Now, the reason I say this is all inevitable, let's see what my next slide says here so I don't go out of sequence. Oh, actually, my next slide says, are they inevitable? And I just said, yes, they are. But why are they inevitable? The answer is that we human beings love to accomplish more. And as we add more tasks and try to accomplish more, if we expand the size of that box and if we grow more capacity, what happens is that we add more tasks. So as a beginner, you maybe had a small box. You did the first set of lessons and learning and reading, and then your box grew a bit bigger. And then what happened is that you added more tasks. The balloon got even bigger until it pressed on the edges. And then maybe you found a way to make some more changes, and then it got bigger. Well, the law of diminishing returns says that you'll be finding it more difficult to grow the edges of your box, to add more capacity. But psychologically, your mind doesn't care. Your mind wants to use up all the available space in the box, all the capacity it can somehow derive. So it'll keep adding more tasks. In other words, we have an insatiable appetite for managing more tasks. And the more capacity that gets added, over time, we just keep adding more tasks. So inevitably, we start to experience those symptoms. So it sounds awful, like there's no way out, but there is, and we're going to talk about it today. So the reason this hasn't been solved yet, and the problem I'm describing of those who are more experienced, is that those who are innovating in the field, I have a little bit of a criticism for them, is that it's easier to talk to the beginners. It's not as complicated to sell things to them. Complicated stuff is harder to sell. The 4 complications I shared before are even more difficult. Hi, Jenny. Yes, you'll not only have the slides after, but you will have the recording. So don't disappear though. And another reason it hasn't been solved yet is that the results are unclear. That if you do take someone to tackle this business of increasing the size of the box because they are an advanced enthusiast, productivity enthusiast, what does the end result look like? It's much harder to teach someone. It's much easier to teach someone, just do this, just do that, and just do the other, than it is to tackle what looks to be a big problem. So if you don't solve this problem today and you say, oh, Francis, you're overblowing it, no, I don't think it's that bad. Or, well, what you could predict is that you may continue to be plagued or distracted by shiny objects. So what are some of the bright, shiny objects that are out there? Well, every week, 2 weeks, I'm someone who follows these things. Every 2 weeks, there's a brand new app out there saying it's going to solve all your problems. And you look at it, and it's written, and it's the graphics and the GUI, the way it's set up, the integration it has with Google Calendar. It's on your phone, it's on your laptop. All these fancy new features make you go, boy, I wonder if I should forgive the one I'm using now and use that one instead. And their job is to make their app seem as attractive as possible. That's one kind of bright, shiny object that is only going to increase in time. The other is the new practices that we come around every few months or so. Right now, it's very popular to talk about start the day like Elon Musk, or start the day like Bill Gates, or start the day. Right now, one of the habits that's being promoted, and it's being shared all over the place, bright, shiny object, is that the way you spend the first hour of the day determines the rest of the day. No, it may be true. I mean, I think there's something to it. But it's been around forever. And it's become a bit of a meme, right? Something that people think is going to be, oh yeah, this will be the solution to the problem if you're someone who's already experienced. I'm going to propose that we throw all that away. and that there are answers to what you should do in lots of areas of expertise. So pick a sport, pick something like chess, pick an area of academic study, pick anything that requires an investment of time and effort. And the law of diminishing returns is true no matter what. You always get to the point where as you put in more and more and more and more studying, you get fewer and fewer results. But there's a change you have to make, a switch. And the switch is towards something to do with self-reflection rather than chasing down a guru. Something to do with an assessment rather than bright, shiny objects. So if I'm talking to you and this is resonating, I imagine that you're what we call a multitasker in our online community. You're a little bit type A, right? You are faced, we will always have a question of how do I manage more tasks? It'll always be that pressure, like a balloon on the box. As soon as you can do more, you do more. As soon as you get more capacity, you immediately use it up. And if you're like me, the unwanted symptoms are just around the corner. So we're going to be using all that I'm saying tonight in the exercises. So don't forget any of it. You'll be carrying it into the cases that you'll be examining and reporting on tonight. But I really want to take you from the place where you may have felt a bit alone, because almost no one speaks to us, people who are already experienced and already know the basics. And no one provides answers. I'm going to provide some answers tonight, or attempt to. And the reason I can speak with a bit of experience is because I used to teach a guru-like course back in the early 2000s. I got tired of doing it, and I had a moment about 2003. I led a program. My mom attended it, and 3 months later, I asked her, "How's it going? How are you using?" She seemed happy in the course. How are you using the stuff I taught? She says, "Well, it's not really for me." No, I started to argue with her, right? Like an idiot. I said, "No, yes, it is." Because I was deep in one size fits all world, which is the world that gurus tend to promote. Right? It's simpler to say, yeah, but everybody should use exactly what I'm teaching, and it does apply to you. So I tried to convince my poor mom that, yes, what I taught did apply to her, and that she should start using it right away. I was an ass. It wasn't until later on, about 2 years later, I gave up teaching that program, in part because I got feedback from her and others, and moved to Jamaica. And then I had an explosion in the number of tasks I was managing, and I started to struggle. I picked up GTD thinking that was the answer. It made things worse. And the reason it made things worse is that it was actually geared for lower task volume than the system I had learned in the early 2000s. So in other words, I stepped back thinking that it was something, I didn't really know this, but I stepped back thinking that a system that was designed for lower task volume would work for me, and it didn't. So when I actually started developing a first program, I said, there's no one size fits all. So if there's not a one size fits all for everyone, that means I need to somehow give people a way to do this analysis on their own. I can't sit with them and coach them through what they need to do. There's not enough coaches in the world for all of us to have a coach who gets to this level. We need to figure out a way to do our own diagnosis and our own analysis. And that's what today is all about. How do you do the kind of assessment as someone who is experienced managing lots of tasks that can make a difference? How do you change gears? So I've talked a lot. And at this point, I want to see if there's any questions before I go into the agenda, or as I go into the agenda. Just drop some questions in the chat if you have any that are there right now that I can answer. Because we're going to be covering 3 points. The first is I'm going to contrast slow versus rapid assessments, pros and cons. We're going to be doing an exercise. So we're going to break from this format. We're going to go over into the networking mode, which is those of you who came early. Remember, we're at the tables. We're going to go back to the tables. You're going to work in groups. You're going to work on 2 cases, and then you're going to come back and report. And then finally, the final part is the coming back to the report. So I don't see that there's any questions. So Romain asks, why not limit or reduce tasks versus expanding the box? Great question, because that's some of the advice that is given to type A's. Well, I'll tell you why it doesn't work. It runs against the psychology of wanting to accomplish great things. Now, some people say, why don't you just cut back your number of projects? Well, if you even have one project, if you're someone who is very driven, what the research says is that you will broaden the depth of what you're trying to accomplish, the one project, and you will create tens, hundreds of tasks to accomplish your objective. Asking someone to cut back the number of tasks is like asking them to step back from their commitments. No, a type B might do that, and type Bs do that. Type As don't. So really what type A's do is they keep pressing in the direction of more. And it's not a compulsion. Sometimes it may be, but most times it's not. It's just a commitment to do something extraordinary. And with that commitment, which you don't take away very easily, because for type A's, it's a part of who they are. Taking it away is like taking away oxygen. This is who they are. And Romain, it's hard to take away that part of who that person is. So very great question. That dynamic is very, very frequent. Type B is telling type A's, well, why don't you just scale it back? And type A's are like, no. They may not say it, but that's what they mean. Okay, so let's talk about what it is to be a diagnostician. And Craig says, agreed, Francis. Conscientious individuals actually feel guilty if they're not overcommitted. That's a quote. Wow. Peter Jordan, University of Toronto. Wow. And yeah, Romain, burning out is a huge issue for type A's. And they need advanced techniques to prevent that from happening. So part of what they need to learn is, how do I manage myself? Someone who has huge aspirations, how do I expand the box so that I keep my life in balance? A huge issue for type A's is not burning out. Okay, so the good news is that, guess what? You're already a diagnostician. And right in this moment, as I'm speaking, everyone in this webinar is diagnosing what I'm saying. You're weighing and you're asking, will what he's saying work for me? Is that true for me? Is it not true for me? So I don't need to tell you that you need to diagnose. I'm just willing to point out that you're at it all the time. And when you read that book or took the training or got advice from someone tells you you're trying to do too much, cut back the number of tasks, or you read an advertisement for an app, you're diagnosing, will that make a difference for me? And in that moment, you're deciding yes or no. So you're already diagnosing. Let's just try to take it up a notch with some tools. Question is, what do you diagnose with? And this is true even people, when I've taught hundreds of people in task management, time management programs, and they sit there diagnosing. People who read most popular book, GTD, diagnose in one way when they were a beginner, and 10 years later, 20 years later, they read the same book and they're like, they diagnose it very differently. So our approach, the one I'm going to share with you tonight that we use at Two Time Labs, is to use the task system analysis method, or TSAM. And it's embedded in 3 places at the moment. It's in my book, Perfect Time-Based Productivity, which you can purchase on Amazon. Get into what we're talking about. There is the New Habits 1 or 2-day training, which is a face-to-face training, as you can imagine. I haven't done too much of those very recently. And they're in the MyTimeDesign online training that we also deliver. And today I'm going to be introducing you to MyTimeDesign Rapid Assessment. That's the program that today is really all about. I'm going to invite you to register in it and actually start taking it for yourself. So here's the heart, the practices that are at the heart of the TSAM method. They're made up of 13 independent practices. And I've put a link there that you can dig into later on if you want to write that down. By the way, if you double click on a slide, sorry, not double click, take that back. If you right click on a slide and say open in another tab, it'll open that slide into another tab so that you can see the tab and save it for later, just so that you know. Okay. You may even be able to download it. I know that I can in the top right-hand corner. I'm not sure if you can, but I know I can. So at the heart of the task system analysis method are 13 independent practices. Some of them may look familiar to you because some of the language may even be similar. The new version of getting things done uses the word capturing. For example, it used to use collecting, I think. So the idea is that tasks come into your system, they get captured somewhere for safekeeping, and then later on, at some point, they get emptied from the point of capture. And when they get emptied, you have 5 choices to act now, store, schedule, list, or toss. Okay, those are the only choices. And in addition to these 7, which we call the fundamentals, which have to do directly with how you manipulate tasks, there's also switching, which is swapping from one task to another, how you do that. Interrupting, which is stopping a task, like sleeping with an alarm clock. It's an interruption. It's a planned interruption. It's a skill in and of itself. Reviewing, which is going over your task management system to make sure it's working and that you're not being overloaded and that maybe there are improvements you could make. And it's also about setting plans for the following week. There's warning, which is about checking to see if your system is about to break. Habiting, which is putting in place a brand new habit for the very first time, identifying it and bringing it into your behavior pattern. And then there's flowing, which is entering into the flow state, or what we call deep work, which means basically doing extremely focused work, the kind where you hate to be interrupted. So Dale has dropped the link to the description of those 13. So in each of our programs, there's a description of them, but you're going to be using that description right now. So I hope you're really listening, right? So here's what the description produces when you do your assessment in the rapid assessment program. Here's what you get. You get a profile. And the profile, if you click on the diagram, click on the graphic in the chat, it'll expand to fill the screen. So in 20 minutes, we figured out a way to take something that used to take better part of a couple of days, maybe 2 hours of the 2-day program. And if you're doing it online, at least maybe the same 2 hours. And using an online quiz, we're able to produce a profile looking like this. And as you can tell from the profile, all 13 skills are laid out. And for this particular individual, let's call him Bob, he is just becoming aware of 3 practices. He's already started on 6, but he's at a very low level. And there are 4 practices that he's taken up to a higher level. So this is what his profile looks like. So he's already been doing probably a little bit of work on his task management, which is why he's not all starting out. So here's the exercise, my friends. And you may find this intriguing and challenging at the same time, but the way it works in the rapid assessment program is that you take the online quiz, which takes about 20 minutes to complete. You get a profile for yourself. You analyze that profile and you develop a Pareto improvement plan. So a Pareto improvement plan is a list of improvements that involve a small change that have a big effect, or they make a big positive improvement. And I dropped also the link for the program, but I'll tell you more about the program later on. But this is the essential steps of the program. So you leave with a plan. So your profile could look something like this. And here's the question that you're going to be answering in an exercise just now. What does that mean? What does that profile mean? Oh, whether you be in bronze or silver. Or coaching Ryan is that if you find yourself in the middle, if you choose the lower one. Why? Because then you can make some easy improvements and move to the next higher one. So that's been the advice if you find yourself straddling two zones. Great question. So what does this report mean? You're going to answer this question. So a Pareto plan, a Pareto improvement plan, let me show you what that looks like, because it takes some interpretation, right? So obviously this person has some strengths and some weaknesses, and we're going to move now into the exercise. And I'll show you what a plan looks like. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to give you a case. It's going to look exactly like this. It's actually this case. So this is the case of Anne. And Anne is experiencing the following symptoms. And Anne also this is what her profile looks like. Okay. So her Pareto improvement plan would look like this. For example, so Anne may say, okay, I want to improve. A 3-step Pareto improvement plan would say, improve emptying to the goal level. First one. Second one, improve tossing to the goal level. The third step would be improve habiting to the bronze level. So let me tell you, this is an awful plan. Of how you could analyze Anne's profile and come up with 3 improvements that she could make. And that's what the exercise is that you're just about to engage in. What is a good plan for her to engage in? So here are the steps I'm going to have you have some fun with. Welcome back. I'm eager to hear what you came up with as in your discussions as a team. Rosemary.
Well, that's great because we only did Anne.
Okay, great. Note to self, 12 minutes is the time it takes to do one. Okay, I'll remember this next time.
Yeah. And if we had more time, we'd still be at it. All right. So we actually looked at all her issues, and we looked at lost information. We thought we could bump her up to maybe bronze. We're on the fence. So we said, we realized that you put listing and scheduling together. So we are taking that as one.
Okay.
Right, and not two.
So the first change she should make is what then?
We can put listing and scheduling.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
Right. That's what I was thinking. For the loss of information.
So you would move listing and scheduling
and
move it up to, I guess you would go to a bronze.
A bronze, right.
Right.
That was something we weren't sure of. Can we only move them up one level?
Yeah, the recommendation is that for the sake of the exercise, one level. Yes.
Okay. All right. We'd also move. I think I'm wondering if we did it wrong now. Now that I'm looking at your improvement plan. Emptying, tossing, habiting. All right. We also looked at. All right. Let me look back at it instead because I can't see that tiny thing.
Okay.
So what we did was tackle the symptoms.
Okay.
Right.
That's the way to do it, right?
Okay. So feeling of overwhelm, we thought that moving scheduling from just starting as well to a bronze.
Okay.
Would take care of that. And it would also help and switching as well. So it would help with switching would help with multitasking and feeling of overwhelm.
Okay. Ryan, right. I'm bringing you up. Ryan just raised his hand as well. So I'm going to bring him up as well.
Okay. And then the third thing we think.
Switching.
Right. So the 3 we've chosen are switching, listing and scheduling, and flowing. flowing to help with no deep work, no time doing deep work or flow.
Okay,
so those are
great.
the three.
So the first one was listing, the second one was switching, and the third one was flowing.
Right. No, listing and scheduling. And if we were
listing
to
choose, and scheduling.
right,
Sorry.
if we were to choose, we would choose scheduling.
You choose scheduling. Okay.
Right.
All right. So so there is a kind of a right answer to this from my point of view. Now, when I say right answer, you have to take that with a grain of salt, because we don't really know what's going on in Anne's life.
Right.
We don't have a lot of detail. But the general recommendation for someone like an Anne with that profile is that they need to start flowing first. So the third, you put that as your third choice. I would recommend that she actually
order. I didn't know it was supposed to be in order. We just looked at the things.
Okay, no problem. But you identified flowing correctly. Now, the reason is that if she knows nothing about any of the other practices, she at least needs to flow so she does her job well. That's the basic.
So we were trying to figure out for Dwayne what we thought would get him the most bang for his buck.
Right.
So what's the leading item that's going to impact the others the most?
Right.
And we thought that his three and a half really weak areas were scheduling. He rushes from one thing to another, and that suggests that he's not controlling his calendar and that he's doing an enormous amount of switching and possibly interrupting. So we thought that if he were able to schedule better, that the improved scheduling would give him more opportunity to do all the other things.
Okay.
So that was kind of our that working on his scheduling would allow for less switching.
Okay.
And would help him, force him to identify the interruptions. And then we weren't certain how far to push that, kind of thinking that if those things moved up to bronze, that at that point, we'd probably want to do a reevaluation.
Okay.
Again, to see what of his effort is going to get him the most return.
Okay. That's so that what Liz is saying is exactly how it works in real life. That whereas you can make a plan for 3 changes and you can be somewhat accurate, the truth is when you make a change, because you're looking at a system that's interconnected, it will result in different symptoms. So it pays to make a change and then observe the system to see what happens next. That's a great observation, Liz. No, there is a right answer, like I mentioned. A right answer. So there isn't really a right answer, but the recommendation that I would make would actually be capturing. And the reason is that when someone is a bronze in capturing, it's such a low level that it pollutes the rest of the system. It's the entry point for all tasks. And when that's a low skill, every other task downstream suffers as a result. So the first recommendation I give to people after flowing is that they need to get their capturing up to at least a silver level, and then they could look at the other skills. Now, again, this is not like an exact science. Whereas we've studied hundreds of profiles and we have data on lots of people who've done this, it's still not like exceedingly scientific and exceedingly exact. So the best I could tell you is that we are making very informed guesses or very informed judgments. And where I want to take this to is to have you guys make these judgments for yourselves, of course. Great. So Liz, thanks so much for that insight. That's excellent. I'm gonna bring you down. Guys, we don't have any more time actually to bring anyone else up. Thank you again, Liz. Thank you. I see a whole lot of hands going up. The time is upon us. So let me ask you a question. What if I gave you a case that had no symptoms? What then? So imagine there's a John Doe and John Doe has no symptoms. So put your answer in the chat. Let me see if you guys come up with, this one has a right answer, but let's see if you could guess. What do you do if there are no symptoms? That none of the symptoms. He's not sick. Okay. And then what does that mean, Rosemary, that he's not sick? Susan says reality check, there's always something wrong. But let's really assume that, he's actually fine with where he's at. Well, I'm not here for, okay, there's Jenny. Have a conversation. He may be in denial. What if he really, he really has no symptoms? So there's a right answer to this one too, in the sense that I have a recommendation. So if there are no symptoms, he may not need to make any changes. Okay, so there are conditions in which his system is actually working as designed. There are no errors and no unwanted symptoms that are coming because his balloon is smaller than the box, to go back to the picture that we drew before. In other words, his task management system has enough capacity to manage all of the tasks that he has on his plate. And when I meet people like that in my programs or anywhere in my training or anywhere in real life, I say, anything. And I may add at the end of that, for now. Because what I really mean to say is, if you don't foresee an increase in task volume, if you don't see that your tasks are going to be increasing, then you don't need to make any changes. So Mr. John Doe, if you look to the future, maybe you're going to retire in a year's time. You may do well enough by just holding on to the system that you currently have and keeping your profile the same. But if you look into the future and instead John Doe is 25 years old, I would say you maybe want to prepare yourself for a life of way more tasks than you're currently managing. And if you start to increase your capacity as just a habit, as a routine, you may be able to stay ahead of the game and not fall back. Because it's the pain of feeling that your task volume is so big that it's now reached your capacity. That pain causes the unwanted symptoms. And if you can act long before those symptoms occur, you're not just a smart person. You're not just it's not just a brilliant tactic. This is a particular way to live. And Liz says maybe he's undershooting and aiming too low. That's possible too. So after a conversation where you say, well, what do you have going on? You say, well, not much. If you get a response like that, it could be that the person is just kind of barely getting by in life and happy. So there's a different conversation to have about their motivation. But the point is that even though some of us have these type A tendencies and we want to accomplish more, everyone is that way. And we may not be that way forever. And certainly my mom wasn't that way when she sat in my training program. She was satisfied. And the right answer is to allow them to be satisfied and to support them if they get to the point where they want to make changes. But this isn't a mad rush to get everyone to get to a goal level. Okay? The point is that you can be quite happy where you are. Okay, so there's room to just be okay and be okay with life as it is. Okay, so how can you craft your own improvement plan? So the point here is, how could you do an assessment and craft a plan like the one that you saw for Anne and the ones that you guys came up with? Well, to do that, there's a shifting and there's a switch that you need to make. And the switch is from relying on a guru to tell you what to do to becoming the kind of self-diagnostician doing the kind of self-diagnosis, doing the kind of assessment of your personal profile that allows you to move to the next level, that enables you to generate a profile that allows you to figure out these Pareto improvements. So I want to tell you some about the rapid assessment program, because this is where we have engineered a way to come up with a 20-minute online quiz that actually generates that profile. And within an hour, you can actually complete the entire program in terms of going through all the materials. You probably want to hang around longer to actually make the improvements, but in an hour, you can have a plan that's based on your profile. So what it is that it took a bit of a breakthrough in thinking on our part to go from cutting down the way the profile is developed in our live programs, in our online programs, and in my book, to doing it online in 20 minutes, and found that that gives you an excellent snapshot, an idea of where you are. And tonight I want to invite you to register into the rapid assessment program. And let's see if I can get the right slide up. As I said, it takes 20 minutes to get that first assessment done. We have an online community of learners that you'll be sharing your profiles and giving each other fact-based feedback. Because here we're talking about a behavioral assessment, capturing, emptying, tossing. Those aren't psychological, they're not personality-based, they're behavior-based. So there's way more accuracy. And for a limited time, definitely there tonight, the price is $39 for the MyTimeDesign Rapid Assessment Program. Fortunately, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can actually try it out. And if you don't like it, it's not working for you, you can ask for your money back. There are some bonuses. I won't go through all of them, but they're worth at least $351. A bunch of them that really we think offer you a unique opportunity to make the switch that we're talking about. Okay, so let me take any questions you may have about the program before we close out for this part of the evening and switch back into networking mode. Are there any questions you may have about the MyTimeDesign Rapid Assessment Program? Can you take the quiz without joining? The quiz is part of the program, Pat, to answer that question, to get that profile. So no, there's not a way to take the quiz. The quiz is made up of basically 13 parts, one part for each of the practices that you saw. That's why it takes 20 minutes if you go through really fast. Is this a one-time assessment? Or you can absolutely reassess later. Yes, of course, that's what we recommend that you do. So you'll always have access to the assessment tool. Yes, we'll recommend that you actually go the next level and take our next training or read my book and actually do a more in-depth assessment, which takes longer. Liz asked, what does the result look like? It looks exactly like the profiles that we've been looking at tonight. The one that you saw for Anne and the one that you saw for Dwayne, and the one that I showed as an example. That's exactly what the profile looks like. The plan looks like a more detailed version of what you saw me call the Pareto improvement plan. So if I let me put back up the Anne slide. If I need to do that with the plan, it's a more detailed version of that plan. It's a very basic version, but the profile looks exactly like this, with just starting, the bronze, silver, and gold. Liz is asking, is the plan part of this offer? The plan, yes, the plan is that's the main part of this thing. The main part of this is that you develop this plan. So with my help and the help of the others who are in the program, the main takeaway is the profile and the plan, both of them. So you'll have the input from the other folks in the program. The point is not the plan. Sorry, the point is not the profile. I think this is what Liz is getting at. Is the point the plan? The point is the plan, yes, because you want to start making improvements immediately. Because you could imagine that if Anne were really here and she was listening to your feedback, she might say, let me go work on my flowing. Let me go find out what flowing is if I don't know. And let me go see what do they mean by flowing? Or now that I've learned what it is, let me go start working on it. So when you do these Pareto improvements, the good news is that as soon as the profile is done, you can pinpoint the improvements you need to make. And I'll coach you in how to focus in on the improvements that provide the biggest bang for your buck. And that's the point. That's the whole intention. Great question. Great questions, Liz. Any other questions? Or queries or comments? If not, okay, I'm going to put you've gotten the link. Dale, could you drop the link one more time? Okay, great. Jenny's got it. And let me introduce you to Kumar. So Kumar is, this was the slide for us to transition into this part of the evening, but this is almost the last slide. So Kumar is the last person for us to diagnose. So we won't be coming back to presentation mode. I'm just giving you to this as another fun exercise for you if you'd like to continue when we go into networking mode. So you can have a chance to talk with other folks, go through the Kumar case. I could give you a hint and tell you the answers are not the same as the other two cases. This is a different answer, right answer, right? But it's just another opportunity to analyze Kumar. And really, what I really want for you to open up for you is this whole new world of self-diagnosis, and have that be the way in which you look to make improvements from this point on. That when in the hour that we've spent together, this little bit of exposure is the beginning of something, a switch from looking for answers from outside to finding answers within. It's just that finding the answers within takes some skill. It takes some focus and some peculiar effort, but it's really what pays off. Okay? And that's what I really want for you. And the promise of the program is that's what you'll get in bucket loads. This transformation, this new way of making improvements. And the final slide that I just put up is a description, in case you want it, of each of the 13 practices, in case you don't know what they are and this is your first exposure. And if there are no other questions, I want to thank you. We're going to go, like I said, we're going to go into networking mode. Jenny says she has to leave. Sorry you had to leave, Jenny. We'll miss you. We'll move over into networking mode and complete the exercise, the Kumar exercise. If you have any questions, I'll be bouncing around in and out. But thank you all for coming, and I appreciate I really love to have the students from the MBA class. That's an MBA class here in Jamaica, actually. Real surprise to see them come. And guys, take care. If there's any other questions,